But Beaver politics, I wanted to explain for anybody who isn't here. Beaver politics is a political talk show idea where we came together to talk about Canadian politics and to talk about the social justice issues. So we started Beaver politics, and then there were so many voices that needed to be expressed. It expanded into having shows 7 nights a week. We're getting all our afternoon spots filled. We have one morning spot filled, and so it's growing. And in my show, it's called The Navigation Station. And the purpose of that and where that evolved from was my background in social work. And I had a business, and my business motto was to help people navigate systems with kindness, right? So our political systems is what ultimately causes a lot of social problems in our country. So that's where the navigation station kind of hits the floor. I'm trying to have those conversations to help people connect the political to the personal. And so during our show, and because of our tech person that has brought us so much information, I just wanted to point out that if you look up here, there's a place to give gifts. And so they're always appreciated, but it's not the focus. But tapping is clapping. We need to get up to thousands of likes. And if you just tap the screen on me, you're going to be able to go back and forth. Just keep tapping and get a couple of hundred likes out in a few seconds. And we're going to appreciate that. And then down below, you can, by the little cube there, you can subscribe. And when you subscribe to Beaver Politics, you get access to our Discord. Over on our Discord, you have sub rooms where you can learn about things going on in different provinces. You can get together and have chats, and then you keep up to date on the news and the important political pieces that are going down in Canada as well as around the world. Because as you know, the United States is a big conversation right now, and we're not going to be able to avoid it here today.
No.
So I just want to welcome you, Christi. Christi is well known here on TikTok, and what I appreciate mostly about you, Christi, is how you formulate all of your investigation and questions and get people to self-analyze and get people to self-reflect, because that's where real, true change occurs, is when someone engages in that kind of self-reflection. So I will make note of that for you. Are you okay to come up into the main box, Christi?
Sure.
Okay. So we're going to have you move over to the main box, and then I've got a couple of...
Big box me.
I've got a couple of ideas floating around in my head that I thought I would just kind of pose question out to you.
All right.
What you've got to say. So let me move you over here. And I believe I just do that by clicking on you, correct?
Like I said, I usually just show up and talk.
All right. Expand, Christi. There we go.
Hey.
There we go. Much better, much better. I feel a little bit of
hair, and I need my roots done.
Okay, so
Christi, I actually made a... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't want to interrupt you. Actually, you go ahead, say.
Well, I was just gonna say I made a video the first summer that I was on here, so like the summer of 2022, about why I make my videos in forms of questions instead of just giving information. And it's because people, when you figure something, it's how I learn. So in the spirit of treating people the way that I want to be treated, if I figure something out myself, it's going to stick. If I hear somebody else saying it, the chance of it sticking, it might, but it doesn't stick as much as when I got there myself. So that's why I do my videos in forms of questions. And there's so many times over the last 3 years that I'll get criticized by somebody who thinks that like that it's an ignorant question or something. Well, how do you even ask a question like that? And I'm like, well, I ask questions to get people thinking and to get conversation going, so that people think about the things that we see as harmful. That was my whole reason for getting on here in the first place.
Right.
Well, that was a little story about that.
In the social work world, when we're doing counseling, that's the approach we use. We get people engaged in the self-reflection process by questions. Oh, and you basically self-reflect back what they've said to you. So anyway, I really pick up on that. Now we
I
are.
also, when I used to train people, or when I would watch other people train people, like in their jobs, I would never let anybody watch me do it. Just do what I do. Watch me. Watch as how I fill this out. Never like that. I said you have to stand behind them and let them do it because it sticks better. And that's the same kind of idea that I have around my questions. Michael loves my questions.
It's well, having said that, what I was thinking about in terms of how we're going to have our conversation today is to start out by asking you some questions because we're living in some pretty tumultuous times. But are we living in tumultuous times? I would like to throw a thought out there about having a look at the positives about what Trump has done to Canada, because it has galvanized Canadians in a patriotic way that I have never experienced. Came close with Jack Layton and that movement, right? And I was very young for, our first political star. Well, some would argue he's not the first, but Pierre Elliott Trudeau, right? So we have a lot of momentum and a lot of people in Canada coming together and proving that Canada is not broken.
So, and I think that those who are voicing their support for the 51st state bullshit, and I hope I can say bullshit on your show. If I can't, let me know. I think that they're just showing where their loyalty lies, and it isn't with Canada, and I think we have a word for that. The Shopify guy. The Shopify guy is not on our side.
Oh, who's the Shopify guy?
I can't remember his name, but he's a CEO. He is a billionaire. He's a Canadian billionaire, and he's basically saying, no, this is a good idea. We should go along with the states. It's not a good idea. It probably just serves his business better.
Well, it's all driven by money. It's all driven by money. And what I can say is that Trump has definitely ripped off the Band-Aid of the corruption in the United States and just how many layers it's gotten to. Now, one of the things about Canada not being broken is our levels of the parliamentary system that we use. In not voting for our prime minister, instead we vote for our representatives. And we have a lot of representatives, and they add layers to our bureaucracy. And so when you topple a democracy, you have to go through many layers. And for one of the first times, I'm realizing just how important it is to have a lot of bureaucracy, because you can get a lot of people on board to be corrupt in order to take that system down.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I think Canada is still standing strong and wanted to impart like a message of hope around that, right? That it's not about a person coming in to save us on the white horse. It's about our existing parliamentary system that is standing strong in amongst the face of all this turmoil.
I agree. And I think that that's where Pierre failed. I think that, and I've spoken about this before, about how I feel that he ran and is still running an American campaign in the wrong country. I think that in America, his campaign of other guy bad works very well because it's only one person versus one person, right? And you can't apply that in a system where you're voting for a representative because that's too many people to shade. Right. And we're finding that he's having difficulty pivoting from Trudeau. That's why he's trying to tie Carney into Trudeau. But I have the same comment of, I don't believe that an American style is going to work going into the election. I think that it was effective while it was, as Trudeau's popularity was going down And as people were facing economic conditions that were uncomfortable and people were very angry, I think it was an easy time for him to ride the rage train to success. And I think that as people see how that's working out in the United States, do you know who Mark Emery is?
Yes, I
Being from
do.
BC, Prince of Pot, right? So
Yes,
he
of
was
course.
he was a big
Of course.
activist, and he's in my opinion, he's a super racist. He really is.
Oh, I,
And he turned, like, he was super, he is still conservative, but he turned on Trump like immediately. And it was nice to see. It was nice to see somebody that I disagree with so strongly agree with me on something we don't want.
I must say, like in my own private circles, I have seen people who lean to the right their entire lives are now in a phase, and I do believe this is about learning and this is about how hard it is to actually change people and why your form of questions and getting self-reflection going. Because I have been working for years trying to get these people to come over to the left-leaning side. But it is so difficult to let go of your preconceived ideas about what our system is, right? And then we have it so badly ripped apart in front of our faces.
Yeah.
They're coming over, like it's happening. The shift is taking place.
It's also very hard, I think, in general, to have these discussions with people that disagree with us without taking it personally. It's so hard. It's something that I work on actively, but I still find myself getting emotional during heated debates. And I think that once you get to that point, it's not productive anymore. But it's a challenge. It's one of the biggest challenges, especially because what we're talking about isn't a lot of people who think about talking about politics as if it's this system that doesn't affect us so intimately. And it does. And I think that's why we get so emotional about it. But anyways.
Well, my motto on, my tag on my own page is the political is personal. It's what I ran last week's show on, because it is personal. Political is personal. It's not just about what happens during an election cycle. It's what happens every day in your life. And our political systems, when we look and we start tearing them apart, the political system that affects us mostly is the most boring, the municipal system, right?
Yeah.
It's the one where we are probably as least engaged in. The number of people voting for city council and mayor and those kind of things are always really low, no matter what community. Even Vancouver, although they're more likely to show up. That's where we really have the daily impact of politics in our lives, right? And we're so disengaged.
Well, if we talk about the Vancouver mayoral,
sorry.
If we talk about the Vancouver, sorry.
I got a working dad. We're going to let, in my show, I always let the guests speak for the first half hour, and then we invite people in for comments. So if you don't mind hanging out, we certainly are interested in everything that you have to say. But we're just going to hang on to those thoughts for right now. And Christi, you are involved. You were in the Vancouver area. What did you think about the municipal?
About the mayoral race? I think that Chip Wilson bought it. I do. I think that Ken Sim was Chip's guy. They make it a Chip Wilson Day. Did you know that there's a Chip Wilson Day in Vancouver because the guy's a billionaire? The Lululemon guy, in case you're not familiar, I can't remember what the number is, but he donated to Sim's campaign that was so much more than the legal amount. It was a ridiculous amount. And they fined him and he's just like, yep, I'm going to pay a fine. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the rules are when you have money. That's not just an American thing. We saw this in the Vancouver mayoral race. Like I said, there's a Chip Wilson Day. The only person who showed up for it was Chip Wilson, Ken Sim, and some other dude.
I live in British Columbia. I didn't know that. Like, how ridiculous. Yep.
Yeah, I don't have the number. Sherry knows the number off the top of her head of how much the donation was, but it was ridiculously higher than the legal limit. And the only thing that happens to the guy is that he gets a fine. That's it. And he had huge signs outside of his $1 billion property. I don't know. It's probably not $1 billion property, but it's a big, big property along the seawall. The guy thinks he owns part of the seawall. He doesn't. Anyway, he had a big sign about something about communism and stuff. It was just, anyway.
Well, you know, how to get around the system. Here's something I think would be if you were voting in that election, and I'm not sure if every community sets the limit on the donations for their mayor and for the city council races, or if that is set from a provincial level, or like BC elections sets those rules. Do you know that?
I believe BC elections sets them, but I'm not entirely sure. But I think it's BC elections. And I think in general, I think that if you took money out of politics, you would see a whole different game. I don't believe that. I understand it takes some kind of money, but like, we're going to have an election soon. And I am impressed with how much Mark Carney was able to raise and how much more he was able to raise than the other candidates. Oh my God, do you know what else, such better things we could do with those millions of dollars in a city that has the downtown east side, in a city that has a homeless problem, in a city that has people aren't eating problem? A lot better things. I could keep going on, man.
One of the things that I would like to see, and I never thought of it in terms of our politicians and a BC elections race, but one of the things I've always thought should change in our court system is the way we fine people. Because people are given, like, say, and what made me think of this is people, you know, they buy $1 million car and they speed race it in Vancouver, and they're caught and they take the vehicle off the road and they're given a fine. But for these fellas that are usually, you know, some rich fellas that are behind the wheels, they just see the fine as part of what they need to pay to drive that vehicle. Because that's how
Cost
much
of doing business. Yeah.
right? The cost of doing business.
Yes.
Now, they should be taking that and just paying for it at a racetrack and doing it that way. But they want the city streets, and the fine is just part of it. And just like what happened with Chip Wilson, it is just part of playing the game. And so I believe that our fining system should be, what's the word I'm looking for? When you disperse it according to how much money somebody makes, right?
Oh, like you make it relative to their income. That's very interesting.
Make it relative to the person's income,
Yeah.
so that they get a bigger fine than the person making $100,000 a year,
Yeah.
right? So that might have put Chip Wilson in check with his little donations and some of the shenanigans. And if you wanted to influence change in that system, you would write your MLA, you would write your mayor, you would write to but the people in charge of the court system to change those laws. I'd like to see a social justice movement that kind of works on that.
And when we talk about the cost of doing business, the idea of just paying the fine in order to do it, I think about Jamie Dimon when he was faced with a fine for something to do with predatory lending after the 2008 crisis. And he was like, it's a drop in the bucket. It doesn't matter. It is just the cost of doing business. And it doesn't matter because the amount of money that they're profiting far exceeds what the fine is. You know who else thinks like this is professional criminals. They look at the time that they have to do in prison as just a cost of doing business. 3 hots in a cot. I go away for a little bit, but really, I'm going to make so much. It's a little bit of time of my life where I'm just going to go hang out over here instead of over here, and it's worth it.
Peter Navarro, Bannon, these are all people that are willing that as part of the cost, because they know when they get out, they're going to be far more rewarded than the
Steve
risk.
Bannon scares the shit out of me, if I'm honest with you. He does. He's up there in my alarm bell area with Elon and Trump, honestly. Has been ever since I laid eyes on him.
Mark Carney was able to, to be able to come in quickly and raise money. Who are Mark Carney's main backers?
You know what? I don't know that. Do you know?
Get his money from. We know, like, for instance, Tiny Trump, he gets his money from the oil and gas. He also gets money from manufacturing, and he gets money from grocery outlets, right?
He was also at some billionaire's mansion on inauguration day. I think it was a billionaire in Montreal or Toronto. I think it was like in the Toronto area, some billionaire. And when we see the billionaires sucking up to Trump, I think we're naive to think Canadian billionaires would be different. Most people that I know who are conservative because they want to protect their bank accounts, because they buy into the idea of conservatives protect people with money.
I think that's true. I think that's true. We have a small number of billionaires compared to the United States. And at this point, we are pivoting, and we are either going to give control over to the billionaire oligarchy system, or we're going to hang on to our democracy. And I think we're being given an opportunity by Trump showing all of the corruption that's been ripped open, by him becoming an imperialistic dictator / king.
He called himself a king. They put a picture with the
And we see our little tiny Trump and the whole Maple Mega movement, the mini megas, tiny and mini megas. I see that whole movement. Yes, has it grown, or has it just been highlighted under Tiny Trump? And can we, in this moment, put it back under the rock it crawled out from under?
Well, I think he when I was talking before about how he was having trouble pivoting away from just the Justin hate, I also believe that his pivot of Canadian patriotism and hugging the flag and wrapping himself in the flag and saying, no, we're not going to, I think that is after 3 years of repeatedly telling us how much we're broken. We're broken. No, we're strong. We're strong, and I'm going to hug the flag. I think it came across as disingenuous, and I think it hurt him. I think that, honestly, I would have respected him more if he would have just stuck to that instead of coming across as bullshitty by doing this whole, no, we're strong in Canada. You either think we're broken or you think we're strong. Both cannot be true. And if you don't explain your immediate 180, you come across as bullshitty, in my opinion.
Yes, and we have some meat to chew on with his Canada First pivot, right? Using the American First whole campaign from Trump. If it isn't more obvious than that, I don't know what is. But here's a little piece that I think people should think about when you're looking at how Tiny Trump is going to be genuine or not around his support for Trump in the United States and all conservatives. They had so much to say about Trudeau's wife, right? And his relationship was devastated in order, he sacrificed that for running Canada for sure. And everything the conservatives and Tiny Trump had to say, whenever, like the WE scandal, how dare she? We don't have a first lady. We're not the United States. How dare she? But look what Tiny Trump's wife is doing. Look how she was involved in his campaign and has become front and center. And they're talking and using terms like the First Lady of Canada. So I want to point that out as a little, like, it's not little. It is part of Tiny Trump following what Trump is doing in the United States.
Yeah. It's again, American style campaign. I think she is a big part of his campaign. And again, if it was Sophie, it would have been a different, nobody's even calling her out. Even though I remember she was on her blog, she was like pro vaccination and pro COVID measures and stuff on her personal blog before it became politically popular to defy that.
To defy that. I just want to take a chance now to just do my little tech piece where I encourage people to tap, tap, tap the live. We're at 5,000 likes at this point. Just keep on tapping the screen where Christi is, and we'll get there. And also, you can give gifts. We have some gift goals up here at the top, and you can subscribe to our Beaver Politics, which will get you all kinds of neat emojis to be able to put up on the screen. And it also gives you access to our Discord. And we welcome you to be part of the Beaver family. And just a little reminder, because now we have 30 some people in the room, I'm not going to invite anybody up into the box until Christi and I have finished our conversation enough that we're going to invite other people and take it in a new direction. So back to our conversation. I really want that.
If whoever makes the Beaver cartoons, if I'll do as many appearances as you want to, if I can get a beaver in a leopard print house coat.
That's a nerdy question.
Okay.
She's our graphics. She's the one that's put us on YouTube. She's the one that's opened the Discord for us. She's the one that's brought in the new direction to have. We've always thought about having Beaver Politics run many shows. We've always talked about it. We were the idea, but she put the boots to the ground for us, right? Having a tech person has been gold. So I'll put that out to her and touch with you. Yeah, see somebody silently nerdy. So anyway, that's my tech piece. I really want people, in terms of the navigation station, and wanting to look at our political systems and seeing that the systems we have in place are standing strong against what's happening in this attack right now. And if you can't have faith in any of the politicians, to have faith in our bureaucratic system that has many loyal followers and many patriotic people that do not want to, get broken while they're in the system. They are standing strong, whether it be CSIS and the role that CSIS plays as an independent structure, right? RCMP, of course, they've been raked over the coals since the convoy. But these systems are still holding strong in our country. They haven't been bought and sold the same way that we see in the United States.
I think that because there are so many cultural similarities between Americans and Canadians, and I think a lot of that comes from watching each other's TV and movies and stuff. I think that there's a lot of assumption that our political systems are a lot more similar than they are. I think that a lot of people who aren't familiar with our systems or who don't pay attention to politics, didn't pay attention in socials class, I think they're probably more likely to believe that we have a system that is closer to the American system than the British one.
Yeah, freedom of speech is a really good example of that. You'll often hear that people think Canada has freedom of speech, and we don't. We have freedom of expression. We were never, and freedom of speech in the United States is only granted in the way that the government cannot interfere with your speech. It just says, but it doesn't protect you from corporations or other people. When you say something that's hurtful or like hate crime-ish or something like that, their system still will constrict your speech, right?
Yeah.
But people just hear free speech and they think it applies as a blanket statement to everything. In Canada, we've maybe learned something from the States, and that's why we said freedom of expression with all these caveats like around you can't harm somebody else. So
well, and that's the thing about the not being able to harm something else. The free speech absolutists will have you convinced that words can't harm, and they absolutely can We've seen this in history. They're being used to harm right now. And
Yeah.
it's not, I understand that you can't see the harm that they do immediately that you would be able to if it was physical harm, but desensitizing is laying the pavement to harm. Mental health issues don't come out like right away like you would see if you had like blunt force trauma, but it is still harm. And I think that the free speech absolutists are being manipulated in the way that, you know, that the Americans are saying, you know, we need free speech, we need free speech. What they're saying is that we need the freedom to lie. And you know what? I just want to say, I'm so sick of politicians and media being polite about the way that they're lying. I saw on, it was an American station the other day when they were talking about how Trump had said that Ukraine had started the war, which is a lie. They said, oh, well, Trump has a spotty relationship with the truth. That's bullshit. Say he's a liar. Say he's a liar. Don't say he's wrong. Say he's a liar. Don't say he has a casual relationship with the truth. Say he's a liar. Don't say that he's ignorant. Say he's lying. Be more candid about it, because there's too many people who are believing that he's just ignorant or believing that it's just a joke. And believing that is a lot less alarm bells than hearing that the President of the United States is a liar. Speech over.
We do it here, though. Nobody calls Tiny Trump out on his lies, and I mean, they're lies.
Yes.
Not that I don't see it with the Prime Minister. I certainly see his lies being called out in the moment that they're happening. There doesn't seem to be any holdback on what they say about Justin Trudeau or the way he's phrasing things, but I've never heard Justin Trudeau outright lie. And maybe overpromises things, but I don't know about lying like the way Trump is saying Ukraine is responsible for starting the war.
Lied about Ukraine. He lied about American banks not being able to do banking in Canada. Lied about eating cats and dogs, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
He's not wrong. He's lying.
He's outright lying, and I think our mainstream media needs to do a better job of confronting that, because they are the third power in our political system, right? They are the.
I think they're so scared. I do. Like, have you seen what's happening to the Associated Press? They refuse to call it the Gulf of America because it hasn't been changed. Like, these guys went, oh, we changed the name, and the rest of the world has to abide by that now. And the Associated Press called it the Gulf of Mexico because it's still called the Gulf of Mexico. And now they're not allowed in the press briefing room at the Oval Office.
Yeah, that is some bullshit, is what that is, you know. And who owns all these media outlets? There's been a total takeover by the billionaire class. And if the world is going to shift into an oligarchy system where the oligarchs want to own the governments, but they need to do it with kindness, right? Like, there's so much money in this system that nobody has to suffer, even if they were to transition into this whole new beautiful world where billionaires are controlling the shots. They need to set WEF more organized, and they better have a better plan. They're just letting Elon Musk run rampant. You know, he's from your class. Get him reined in.
Right? It seems ridiculous. It seems like we're living in a movie where we're yelling at our screens like, somebody stop. He's literally every billionaire villain in every action movie we've ever watched.
Yes.
And just keeps going. And I was in an American Live this morning. I didn't last long. I jumped because I waited my turn and I asked my question. My question was, because they had said Donald Trump had appointed Musk as the leader of Doge. So I got up and I said, do you believe that? Why did the White House file an affidavit saying that he was not the leader of Doge and he wasn't even an employee of Doge? And then I waited, and then there was crickets. The whole place was silent, and then somebody else started talking about something else. And I'm like, hey, hang on a second. Like, am I going to get an answer to my question? And they're like, well, you can ask your question, but we don't have to answer it. And I'm like, okay, well, then I'm going to go. It was weird. It was like the silence told me that they realize what's happening, but they couldn't speak to it.
Right. And it hurts in your brain. Like, physically, if you study the phenomenon of when someone's cognitive dissonance is challenged, there's a physical pain in the brain that actually occurs the same way as if you got hit or punched in the face. And so it takes time for them to kind of respond. Most of the time that feeling is responded to with anger, but when it responds with silence, that means people are thinking. That means your question made them do it. From all they watch, I don't usually go in them. That's what happens. People, you know, they have the challenge and then they blurt out what's wrong. Now, in our system, part of Tiny Trump's work has been to try and degrade and to tear apart and to misuse our parliamentary norms. And I wanted to bring up the non-confidence motions that he engaged in repeatedly and made a mockery of our parliamentary system, moving forward non-confidence motions when he knew he didn't have the backing and he knew that they would fail. The amount of money it cost us taxpayers from a party that is always talking about fiscal responsibility and how their members just turn a blind eye to it.
Yeah.
It shows me that there's a piece in our system that needs to have a piece of accountability built into it. When you have an incident motion fail, you're supposed to resign. He didn't resign. He instead wore it as a badge of honor and twisted it to make it look like the other side were doing something devious. And there was nothing in place to stop that from happening. So I see a gap in our non-confidence motion system. And that's, I did write to my MP, although they're conservative where I'm at. And I brought that up. I said, you know, what is this doing? What is engaging in these non-confidence motions doing except making Canadians just not pay attention and not have a belief, like trust in our system? Go ahead, Christi.
I think you just answered your own question. I've said for a long time, I think that the theater that happens in question and answer period in the House of Commons, I think it's a joke, and I think it's intentional. I don't think that those people are just acting like that because they don't have the emotional maturity to act in a professional way while they're at work, like everybody else does while they're at work. I think it's intentional. I think that they want to turn off as many people as they possibly can. I think that they only want to have the angry people because the only people who are tuning in and enjoying that kind of thing are angry people. Anger is a very, very powerful engine. It is so much more powerful than anything positive. I've talked a lot about that. So I think it's intention. And when we talked earlier about people just paying fines and viewing it as a cost of doing business, I think this is the same thing. I think that this was part of the marketing campaign. Just keep hammering non-confidence, 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 and then blaming the other guys, blaming Singh, blaming the Bloc, blaming all the other guys for not putting it through. That way you're creating more enemies. True, it's not just Trudeau. These other guys are propping up Trudeau. He used it as a marketing campaign.
Well said. Well said. That's some, you know what? I didn't have that marketing piece conversation in my head, and it just is making light bulbs go off because that's exactly it. And so
everything is just about marketing for him. Everything from the plaid shirts to the rubbing the wood to the fixing his face so he's got no wrinkles. Come on, we know what the guy's face looks like. You know what I mean? All of that, everything is about an image, and it is very like the Trump campaign where you look at Trump had those trading cards. I made fun of them the first time. I thought it was satire. I honestly did, where they had Donald Trump, this fucking 80-year-old guy dressed up like Superman with these AI muscles and stuff. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't a joke. It is to plant seeds. They keep planting seeds, just like this 51st state stuff. Plant seeds, water the seeds, just keep talking about it, keep putting that image in there until it is more common in the minds of your voters.
Well, I know that the Conservative Party Merc department is exploded.
Yeah.
Exploded. They sell T-shirts and pens and cups and all the slogans, right? Canada is broken, axe the tax, all those things. You see it on bumper stickers. When I took video one time of this trailer in front of me, and it just had our BC election time, but it was all of the federal slogans, right?
Yeah.
Along our BC Conservative Party, but it was all the federal slogans, right? So it works. That's why they're doing it.
It does.
It works.
Same with memes. Same with the reason that they use memes, because they work.
Yeah. Would you be open to having some guests come up now, or?
Yeah, come on up. Let's have a party.
Okay, we're going to have a little party. Yes. So just, well, before the party starts, let's remind people that we've got some gifts, goals that we're trying to reach, and please tap the screen. I see we're up to almost 9,000 likes right now. And share. Just put your finger on Christi at this point and bring up your list and share that out. And just to remind people that we are getting subscribers to Beaver Politics now, and that gives you access to our Discord and to a bunch of cool emojis. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, and I'm going to start bringing people up into the box.
Come on up.
It's coming up. Excellent. I've not.
Hey! Frontline feminist.
Yes, there was somebody else in the box, but I think they. Oh,
Perry was also up here. Yeah.
Up here. All right. So Frontline, you're up center. Go ahead.
What a shit show. I'm sorry, but it is. Honestly, my biggest worry right now is what's going on in Europe. Obviously,
Yes.
I'm Eastern European, so I'm very worried about what's happening. Talking to family back home, they're all super worried. People are already starting to try and move out east, trying to get jobs in the UK and Germany. It's crazy. The propaganda is so strong out there as well. Like, especially right now with JD Vance trying to meddle in our elections, in Romania's elections. And like the propaganda in my own country is completely unchecked right now. So it's worrisome, right? And then at the meeting that they had in the Middle East with all these leaders to try and negotiate what's going on in Europe, without Ukraine being there, of course,
Right.
they're talking about like how they want to roll back the NATO border to what it was in 1997, which would literally put a lot of countries out of NATO, including my country. And it's scary, right? Because that's what they're trying to do right now in my country, is they're trying to elect a Putin puppet. And he's fighting right now with the electoral committee to try and run again, because he ran in the back in December and he won. But our country canceled the election because they found out that there was 1 million euros that were being funneled into that campaign from Russia in TikTok ads and TikTok videos and TikTok bots. So they canceled the election because they had the evidence that this was completely interfered with. However, he's now fighting with the Electoral Commission, and he's got JD Vance and this whole propaganda team on his side to try and let him run again. And it's completely divided my country. People are literally fighting with each other left, right, and center. And it's either they're going to place a Putin puppet in Romania, or if they don't, then if they somehow get pushed out of NATO, then we're next on the chopping block. And Romania doesn't have a strong military. It doesn't. They're going to be done very quickly.
I think that the reason that they're pushing for an election in Ukraine is for also for a Putin puppet. And
110%.
Germany is what, 2 weeks away from an election? A little bit more than 2 weeks?
No, it's this weekend. It's this weekend.
Is it?
It's the 23rd. It's this weekend.
That came fast.
Yeah,
Wow.
so I'm waiting to see what happens in Germany, because I think it's going to give us a clue to what's going to happen in the world.
Yes, I agree.
I think, yeah, I think that if you see the AfD win in Germany, I think that I think a lot of pits of stomachs are going to drop at the same time. I really do.
I don't think, like, they're definitely not leading in the polls, but they're gaining support, which is absolutely crazy. And, this whole BS that he's spreading about, Ukraine needs an election. Like, no. I posted a video last night that was talking about, like, well, Winston Churchill didn't have an election for 6 years because they were fighting in World War II. There's a reason for that.
Ukraine actually has laws. They have laws that prevent elections from happening at times like this. Like,
exactly.
or write the new. But Trump just wants to write new laws for what he ever wants. Anyways, him and Putin. That's it.
Yeah, and what I wanted to bring up, and then I'll let somebody else speak, but what I find really worrying is that at the end of the day, a lot of people don't know too much about what, Eastern European history. But Putin started talking about annexing Ukraine all the way back in 2002. He started talking about it, right? He started that narrative to get people used to it. And then, they had Yankovic in charge, which was a Putin puppet. And when people rose up to take him out of office, they invaded. So you know what I mean? They were fine with Ukraine being ran by a Putin puppet because they were getting all of their resources and they were using it for their own financial gain. And the second they didn't have that anymore, they invaded Crimea. Doesn't that sound a little bit like what's going on right now with Canada? Talking about annexing. But what if we have a conservative leader? Then they won't care so much because they'll be able to get whatever resources they want from us without quote unquote annexing us. But what's going to happen the second, what if we don't have a conservative leader? Is that going to make them more inclined to actually use military force or complete and utter economic force? It feels a little similar, and it is very scary to me as somebody who, ran away with her parents from Eastern Europe when Putin came to take power because we knew what would happen.
Wow, talk about the political being personal, right? You're telling a story, and I think in Canada we're starting to become very aware of we're in a geopolitical climate now. The globalization of the world is sort of, coming to a climax here, and it's like they want to structure all of the normal players. And if there's something else that, is, I'm going to say this very loosely, a positive from the way things are going down is I think people are more aware politically than they ever have been because of all of the global threats that are out there in changing the status quo to the far right wing again. And Germany, I think, is all keeping eyes on. And let's not forget about the far right wing players that have been invited here to Canada, entertained here in Canada by the Conservative Party. And so I think what happens in Germany is going to be a litmus test for what will befall the rest of the world politically.
Yeah, it's a very uncertain time, and there's just, I wish that I saw what you're seeing, but in my day-to-day life, I just see apathy. I just see complete and utter apathy. I stopped talking to my best friend when Trump got elected because she doesn't want to be involved. She doesn't care about politics. She just thinks that it's all negative and she doesn't want to worry about it because it's all negative and she just doesn't want to focus on it. So I wrote her a message yesterday trying to say hey, I know we haven't talked in a while, but things are actually getting pretty bad. I just want you to be mindful of the information that you consume. If you're unsure of something, please check with me, use a fact checker, but just please be mindful of the information you consume, right? I love you. If you ever do want to, join the fight, talk to me. And she basically just wrote back. She's like, I love you too, but we just live in completely different worlds. I'm just not going to get involved. There's no point. And, I'm just going to keep living my life. And I hear that a lot. I hear that from so many people in my day-to-day life. They just don't want to get involved. They don't want to know. They don't want to turn on the news. They just think that everything's going to be okay. And that is terrifying to me. That's more terrifying than these evil powers. What's the most terrifying to me right now is the apathy of the people. And I see it in the United States as well, right? I mean, they had bigger protests back in 2019 than they're having right now.
Yeah, they might be a little scared to get shot too down there, more so, because their freedom to protest is being infringed on. What I mean by saying that, that to take some hope is that shifting apathy in people is about shifting messages of hope. If they see the system as not having any glimmers of light in it, it'll keep them from showing up at the voting booth And so sometimes, if in amongst all that darkness, if you can find the peace and reach out to that peace that you might be able to have some control over. And of course, the vote option is another big option. So having people show up to protest is because they believe somewhere that what they're going to do is going to make a difference, right? So I think it's important to hammer home some of the positives, although I spend the majority of my time highlighting the bullshit, right? But I appreciate, my heart goes out to you, feminist frontline, but my heart goes out to you because when we have awareness, when we become woke people, it is dark. It's discouraging. You start understanding the problems of the world, and understanding that it took 30 or 40 years of manipulation, and trying to respond to that in an election cycle. It's almost an impossible uphill battle, but it's about winning the little ones along the way. Canada is in a flux right now where we have an energy of patriotism I've never seen before. And that's our glimmer of hope right now and what we need to hang on to. And if we could use that message to get people out and involved, perhaps we can make a difference. I want to offer Justin time.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you'd like to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I Frontline Feminists, it's a very concerning time. I agree with you. And I think we get lost in the moment versus the longer game. And Trump is a gift to the world. And I know it's a terrible thing to say. It's a terrible gift. And that gift is, particularly in Canada, we can see, and I think the Europeans can see too, is they're slightly more evolved, and I believe we're slightly more evolved than the Americans. We can see what this kind of extremism does to a society. And a month ago, the Conservatives were 20% ahead in the polls in Canada. And now Mark Carney, should he be the Liberal leader, will be the majority Liberal Prime Minister if the election is held according to the most reputable pollsters in this country. So Canada is watching. We have had the privilege of watching this. Now, I do a lot of work in the United States, and so I have a number of American colleagues, friends, associates. And for about a year, since this Trump issue has been going on, I've been saying, America needs a good war. I'm sorry, but you do, to remember what the hell is right and what's wrong. Because you guys have lost your way. And the rational people in the United States agree. The problem is they have a two-party system. And that two-party system is a binary choice.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. In Germany, I understand and I hear your challenge, and I know the AfD is surging, but there's 5 parties in Germany. It's a coalition government under any conditions, which mitigates that extremism. Mm-hmm. So find some hope in that. I don't know about your country in Romania, Frontline, but, and we have the same thing here in Canada. We gave Stephen Harper a minority government. I never voted for that guy. I voted with Brian Mulroney, but I never voted for Stephen Harper. He's a white supremacist from Alberta. Yes. I'm sorry. And Poilievre is too. He's this right-hand guy. These are all white Aryan nations guys. And even then we mitigated Harper in the first 4 years. And then when we gave him the 4-year majority, he blew it so bad the Conservatives were almost blown out of the water by Trudeau, who was nobody at the time. So we have some common sense in Canada. And please find some comfort at least where you live now.
Yeah.
I have a great deal of confidence that in Canada we'll do the right thing when we go to the polls in the next few months.
I really appreciate the messaging here. Have you something to say back to that, Frontline?
Yeah, I mean, I really hope you're right. What's getting me a little bit worried is like seeing how this Ontario election is turning out. Doug's still in the leadership, and I just posted about this yesterday. The Globe and Mail actually reported this, even though they're more of a center right, more kind of conservative news source. But they talked about how, you know, Doug's government is spending millions of dollars right now on Fox News Sean Hannity ads.
What is that, eh?
Because he's trying to, you know, show the MAGAs and Trump how we're a great ally and a great economic partner, and they just need to, you know, treat us with kindness because we're such a great partner. Like, Trump doesn't care. Republicans don't care. That's not going to help. Why are you spending that money on ads on Fox News rather than spending that money on Canadian healthcare and education? It's just mind-blowing to me that people are still going to vote for this guy.
Can I speak to that?
Yep, please do.
Trump is also a gift to Doug Ford, because Doug Ford has come out as a champion for Canada, and all is forgiven for all his missteps over the last 6 years in Ontario, because he is a champ. We'll turn off their power. You heard him. And that's very
he did a
popular.
180 though. He did a 180 within 3 days, right? He said that, and then
Sure.
3 days later, he was like, "Oh, we should pander to them." Like, literally, he did a 180 super fast. And did nobody catch that?
Caught it.
Yeah, but by and large, he's still very. I mean, the only outlier, premier we've got is Smith in Alberta in terms of the continuity of our political leaders. So he's still on Team Canada, and that's how he is seen right now as a result of this. It's brilliant political timing on his part to call an election now. It's horrible.
I don't think he's on Team Canada. I really don't. I think he's on Team MAGA. That's just my own personal opinion from everything that I see him do, from the relationships that he has with the Republicans. I don't see him being on Team Canada. I see him pretending to be on Team Canada.
Yeah, as well as let's not, somebody in the comments just reminded me the Starlink deal is back on the table. Like, that was off the table all of one day?
Yeah.
All of one day, and now here we have Elon Musk being invited into our election systems by supplying the machines, the election, like the actual voting machines. I think that's more of a scary move. Yeah, I agree with you, feminist. He has done a 180, but I also agree with Justin Time. Doug Ford capitalized on that moment, and he was the only premier that stood out as strong as that, and he stood out stronger than the prime minister in that moment. He stood out stronger than the Conservative Party in that moment. So he really, and we're 2-second people in a 5-second world these days, right? So the message that got delivered about the patriotism that day was part of how Canada galvanized. And I think it was a strategy, and that he truly is more of a far right winger than.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. It's political theater, right? That's what all these conservatives do. Everywhere in the world, Europe, America, Canada, they just play political theater to manipulate voters.
So I see we have a new guest. Nova has joined us. Nova, would you like to join the conversation and have the opportunity to say what you need to say, want to say? I see. Well, your mic's off. If your mic is on, if you join us, just kind of flag and let us know you're back and part of the conversation. Christi, we have you. Oh.
Really don't have a whole lot to add,
Okay.
but I'm really interested in the conversation and agree 100%. I live in Alberta, and it's horrible, and I'm really fearful of what's to come.
So are you more worried about your provincial problems, or are you more worried about what's happening in Canada and how your premier is, let's just say, not galvanizing patriotism in Canada?
I'm very disappointed and fearful of my premier not being Team Canada, because I think we need to put Canada first. We need to stand up together.
And so do you connect with the movement within your province that is doing that? I know, for instance, if this helps any, we have a new Beaver politics host named Jana, and she has a Saturday morning show. She's from Alberta. We also have Nerdy, our tech person who's responsible for all of these graphics, and she runs a show on Friday night. So if you wanted to kind of engage with people who are supportive from your own province, who are living the fear that you are living and finding a way to express it through the Beaver Politics show and to give people opportunity to speak, because this is the therapy, right? Right here.
Absolutely.
This is how we're dealing with it, because we sometimes don't have like-minded people sitting beside us. Or if your work environment, you're not allowed to talk about politics. You're not allowed to express things. So here's a way to do it. So I would encourage you to check out all of the Beaver Politics shows, but those two particular the Beaver Politics hosts, they're from Alberta, and they are living it. They are living it the way that you are living it. So I encourage you, and my heart goes out to you, because fear is no fun to live with. And when you get stuck in that fear place, it makes it hard to take that next step and come on here and voice your opinion and listen. I appreciate you even being in the box, because it helps our algorithm for this show to get out there in the TikTok world. I'll just take this shameless opportunity to remind people to tap the screen. Now that I'm in the screen, to tap on my face and get the likes going. And there's gifts and there's subscription opportunities for Beaver Politics, because this is our therapy. This is our voice. And
Absolutely.
Let's hear it. And I appreciate you coming up, even to express your fear, because there are so many people that are right there. I mean, I go through bouts of fear probably 20 times a day, right?
Exactly.
What I'm watching on the news. And then I come here and I get grounded.
It's really sad because, friendships, you think you know people, and I'm shocked when they say that they support Polyev or they support Danielle Smith, and I'll say, but why? I just can't comprehend why.
Christi, did you want to have a little feedback on that comment?
I totally felt it. They don't know why. I have a friend who is a Danielle Smith fan. He's from BC, and her name came up once. We were having lunch, and he's like, Danielle Smith, I really like her. And I said, okay, why? And he's like, oh, I like her. And I'm like, hey, I know you said that, but like, why? I said, does she have any policies that you like? Or, and he's like, no, I just really like her. And I'm like, well, like, if you were an Alberta voter, would you vote? He's like, absolutely. And I said, well, doesn't it concern you that you don't know why?
And they don't know why.
Yeah. And he kind of, it really did stick with him, and he thought about it, and he's like, okay, I'm going to look into her. And I didn't follow up, but I hope he did look into her. And I think that speaks to the conversation that the missus and I were having a little while ago about, pardon me, hang on, I have to clear my throat. So sorry for that. Trying to be a lady. I think it speaks to the marketing campaign. I think that they don't need to sell people on policies and what they're going to do. They just it's like a popularity thing. It's about how they come across. And pardon me. I think that if you're a conservative man, Danielle Smith is a great politician. She never raises her voice. She's a woman who's she dresses conservatively, right? And she's the temper in her voice is very, calming and, dare I say, motherly. And I think that that's part of her appeal to conservative guys who don't know why they like her.
Well, even my daughter's fiance, I told her to dump him, just kidding. But he's very conservative, and she's not. I mean, she's very much like me. She's very liberal-minded. And she'll say to him, well, why? And his only excuse that he can come with is, well, my family's always voted conservative. I think that's the saddest excuse there is.
Voters. Happy and I talk about them all the time, about legacy voters. We've been in
Exactly.
lives where we've talked to a legacy voter. And that is exactly what you're describing. Like, my parents voted conservative, so I vote conservative. Well, like, I first of all, I think it's kind of lazy of just not having to look into anything or, you know, put your name behind believing in anything. You just go, okay, well, it's not genetic, man. It's not like brown eyes. You don't get this kind of thing from your parents.
No, and I recall my parents. I'm originally from Nova Scotia, and I remember my parents voting conservative. But I don't think the Conservative Party then is the Conservative Party now. It's been like hijacked by a bunch of white supremacists.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly what's happened in the evangelical movement. That's a
Yes.
white supremacist movement. I was so shocked the first time that I seen that, I call him Tiny Trump, but little PP there, to see his mug with a poster that has a big Christian cross on it with "He has risen."
Oh, I know.
Here's his face, like as big as my face is in the graphic here. You know the double messaging that's going on there. And the way that, here's another piece of our political system that I think needs to shift. We need to start taxing any church that's involved with training their members to be involved in politics. Churches are supposed to be, you know, separation of state and religion, so to speak, and I use that flippantly. However, in order for a church to be in that tax-free status, they are to be giving back into the community. And it's what I have seen. I went on, it was the United Church of Canada. I went on their website, and they actually have training for disciples of how to infiltrate the school district system, your mayor and your city councilors, and then the MLAs up to the MPs.
They're a political movement now.
They're a political movement, and how did they get to be that without the proper designation for taxes? And so there's another piece of our system that I'm failing and contributing, because it is the conservatives that have, let's just say, jumped on that opportunity to manipulate people.
Well, I'm so grateful for all of you on here. I follow this creator, and I, you know, Nitty and Boots on the Ground, and there's so many great commentators that, I mean, I get more from this than I do from the news. Sorry, I'm having a bad brain day. From our television news.
Right.
There's so much that goes on behind the scenes that we never hear about.
We have less to fear than the mainstream media. We have less to lose.
That's the word, mainstream.
Yeah. Or legacy.
I can hear you, Christi.
Oh, sorry. I'm in my kitchen. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
I think that legacy media, I think that they're scared shitless right now. I really do. I think that they see what's happening in the States. They see what's happening. They know what's going to happen with a conservative government. You can even tell in they're leaning. They used to lean a little bit more pro Trudeau a couple of years ago, and now they're not. They used to challenge Pierre a little bit more a couple of years ago, and now they're not really. So it feels like they're leaning a certain way, and I think that that's because they're just, you know, bending the knee to the guy that they think is going to be in power. When you're an independent TikTok content creator, it doesn't matter, man. It doesn't matter. I can say things that I'm not worried like a media would be, except I'd like to bring up what's happening with the breakdown. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
No.
Yes.
He's a creator in Alberta, and he's called The Breakdown, and he was very critical of Danielle Smith and the Alberta government taking kickbacks from the private medical services. And the people providing the medical services are now suing him, and they made him go offline because they don't like to be criticized. They got the money to keep him in court, and I think it's bullshit. I think he's probably right.
Wow.
That is a scary thing. But the phenomenon that's happening from the TikTok world here is that we know that we are in a precarious position. We're on a right-wing platform. We've been sort of privileged to be able to use our voices this way. And we know that we're at risk all the time of having the rug, taken out from underneath us. But so many of us are starting, and we can thank Nerdy or Tech here. Christi, you have this going on through PolyChick in your world, but reaching out to other platforms so that our same messaging continues. So we're on Discord, and I know Beaver Politics is on Discord, and we're on YouTube now. So when our voice, because we are in jeopardy all the time of being erased here, and being able to spread our message through different platforms, I think is important. So look for us on YouTube.
Absolutely.
Live. If you're interested, your voice will be on there. Nova, you don't have your video camera on, but this show is going to be recorded and then put up on YouTube, right? So you can go and if you're curious, you can go and check out what you said, how you presented it. If there's something else that, I wanted to say this, and then come back and say it again on another show, because we welcome that.
Thank you so much.
I want to take the time. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Justin.
Sorry. Can I just make a comment? Nova said, I don't know why people think that way. How can they not see the dastardly deeds and still support this individual? When I was at university at political science, and I won't say when because it was a long time ago, they taught us that there are two basic types of human beings: conservative and small c conservative and small l liberal. And the conservative fundamental belief is that people are fundamentally evil. And so they look at the world from that position. The people are always trying to take advantage of you. People are always going to, try to take from you. That's the small c conservative at the base of all politics. At the base of the small l politics is people are generally good. And that's the difference between the liberal and the conservative. So those folks who, you don't know why, because somewhere in it resonates, they have that fundamental core belief that everybody's trying to take from them. And therefore, someone like Danielle Smith, who they can resonate with her message, because she's also a small c conservative, is there to advocate for her, as is Trump. Mm-hmm. He is a small c conservative in the United States. And so that it's at their core. It is at their core. This is what they believe, whether they were taught that by their parents. Obviously, their environment made a difference. The second thing I'd like to address, Nova, for you is that as bad as Danielle Smith is, she has limitations as a premier. If you understand our political system in this country, Alberta for years was reliant on the federal subsidies to balance its budget, because the federal government disperses money out to each province on an as-needed basis. So you're either a have or have not province. Right now, Alberta's a have province because it sells so much oil to the United States. But that day will turn around. There's some suggestion that Trump is negotiating with Ukraine to bring Russia's oil back into the world market, which will depress the prices, which will hurt Canada, which will allow him then to economically squeeze Canada, and that will hurt Alberta. Mm-hmm. But the federal government is there to help out. And so that's really the critical government for us always, is who is the federal prime minister and what are their philosophical objectives and leanings, especially in this time where we have to protect ourselves from a guy like Trump. So thank you very much. I appreciate giving me that little bit of time.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting.
That was extremely interesting, actually. Would you be interested in coming and being a guest on the show? I think we need to platform your conversation a little more thoroughly. I'll just throw that out there. Actually, no.
Oh, myself? You mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Just you too, Nova. Anybody wants to be a guest, we welcome guests, because it's about speaking with your own voice and letting people know that there are other like-minded people out there. Here we are on a right-wing platform, and our left-wing voices have found each other, and we need each other because it can be very bleak out there. Sorry, Nova, go ahead.
No. I was sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I've been, writing my premier, writing my MLA, whoever I can write, and try to think of different things that I can do that may sway even a vote.
Well, you're welcome to come on this show and try to do that, because I know people in Alberta watch. There's always these guilty pleasure people in the background lurking, right?
Yes, guilty pleasure. I like that.
You know what? Hate watching is still watching. Even if people are watching me to hate me, they're still hearing my message. So I'm good.
That's right.
And I'd like to welcome Rad Mike. It's our first opportunity, Rad Mike, to actually speak to each other. I appreciate all your support over on our Discord. I appreciate your support on my page. And I appreciate the very credible information that you bring the receipts to the table with when you have your conversation. So I'd like to welcome you to add to our conversation here today.
The thing is, I want to say one thing real quick, is that if you live in a bubble and you're just kind of doing your own thing and you go and like, oh, Daniel Smith or like Doug Ford's making an announcement, let's hear what he has to say. You listen to what he has to say, it's like, well, what's wrong with that? I don't understand why people don't like this. Like, everything makes sense, like what she's saying. Like, if you watched the health announcement last night in Alberta, like, there was nothing really fundamentally wrong with it unless you break it down and go into the details of things. Like, unless you're doing that, there's not necessarily anything fundamentally wrong with what she said last night.
I agree.
Like, unless you know, like, the full details of, like, the path that got to that, then you have no idea that anything that she said was wrong or lies or...
Well, it's a softball pitch, right? That's what, and damage control. And the soft seed conservative really shining in the way her voice was calm, the way she delivered the messaging, the way, the way she comes across as being in control. And
yeah, even
at a control piece is, it doesn't jive with what you're looking at. And I think that's marketing too.
That makes sense.
Well, even like Pierre Polyev, like when he says, like he gave a little outline in his email, unless you actually broke it down, like Frontline Feminist did, wouldn't understand like why some of those things were wrong. You're like, well, that sounds actually really good. Like, you gotta go deeper. Like when you tell someone you don't like this politician, you have to be like, this is why. Like, this is what they're doing. And then people will start to see it. Like Danielle Smith's like promised a lot of things, but like she's done the complete opposite in a lot of cases of what she promised. I don't know about Doug Ford. I don't pay attention to Ontario too much other than like federally. So
yeah, it's hard. There's a lot of players that are active and on the move right now here in Canada. And a lot of, the conservative, well, we have a blue wave across Canada in terms of running our provinces. And so they do have the biggest voices. And Doug Ford and Danielle Smith are consuming all the airtime right now. Because usually a provincial, shenanigans stays within the provincial news system, right? Danielle Smith exists in the mainstream media, and so does Doug Ford. And we got to take the best and leave the rest on this one. Doug Ford helped to create patriotism, to create that feeling, galvanize people together to fight against what's happening. And we got to take that piece and we got to work with it. And then we still need to pay attention to the other pieces. I watched, the Mossy Moose is one of the Beaver politics hosts. He has his own show, the Progressive Moose. He's in Ontario, and he did a breakdown of the debate. And the positive things that I got out of his conversation out of Ontario is that Doug Ford may win again, and it's because of the snap election, because of having it in the winter, because of using the opportunity to jump on the patriotism wagon, so to speak. All of that will work in his favor, but he's probably going to go only in it with a minority situation, which, that's the strength to take. If you can knock them down a few pegs, in knock them off the pedestal a little bit, have a little more control with the opposition. And the Green Party really stepped up to the plate in Ontario. They did an awesome job during the debate. And like British Columbia, the Green Party, with only 2 seats, holds the power balance because it was that close of an election. So it is amazing how things can shift really quickly. And well, I guess we'll find out. Is it next Thursday, the election in Ontario?
I
Right?
believe it's like the 28th, isn't it?
This week with Germany, we're going to get some vision. I think in Germany that, the far right wing extremism is going to be knocked down a peg. And that's going to create a trend that we all need to celebrate and talk about in places and spaces like this, and keep those positive messages going so we can get to the apathy, right? So we can help motivate people to once again have some level of trust in our systems that have been devastated by our politicians that like Tony Trump. Stephen Harper, what he did, like you read, it was Stephen Harper put in 600 of the 800 federal judges that exist here in Canada. 600. And then blaming all of the crime and the revolving door situations with people going in and out of prisons on Trudeau, when they are the ones that appointed judges that would be friendly to their causes. And mostly, of course, that relates to environmental causes so that they can, drill kind of thing. Anyway, I don't want to rant too much. I want to let some other people have an opportunity to talk. Christi, have you anything else more to say?
No, actually, I was just going to come in and say goodbye. My dog's been nudging me of, hey, it's time. But thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed my time here. I can't wait to come back. I'll be messaging you guys with when can I come back. I really will.
Absolutely. Anytime. We welcome the conversation. And we were very, like today, we just freestyled it. And if you would like to on a particular conversation, then I'm welcome. I welcome you to do that as well. So have a great.
Honestly, if I didn't have real life stuff going on, I could probably stay here until tomorrow morning, and we would never run out of stuff to talk about. But yeah, I got a dog who's giving me the eyes. You know what I mean?
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody else. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye,
I as well have to go pick my grandchildren up. I'm a little bit late already, so I must run, but I want to thank you. It's been very informative, very therapeutic, and I will be back.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure I've never been on a live before, so I'm not sure how to do this.
Okay. If you can't figure it out, I can do it. We can do it from our end. So
just press the X at the top to exit the live and it'll take you right out.
yeah. Just give you the opportunity. Great. There you go. Once you do it and you practice it, it gets better. And so they keep telling me here. As I struggle with tech almost every time, it's like learning it for the first time every time I'm sitting in the seat here. But to continue our conversation, and I'll take the shameless plug right now to Beaver Politics is what this is. I have the show, The Navigation Station. I'm part of the Beaver Politics movement. We have 7 shows a night during the week, or seven shows every night, and we have four shows during the day, and we are filling the slots as we go along because we'd love to expand where this takes us, because there are more people speaking from the left-leaning side of things on this platform than there ever has been. So please, if you can, do gift us and keep tapping is clapping and making, the more likes we generate, the more we're going to get out into the algorithm, and the more we're going to find people who are sitting there with the same thoughts as us, right? The same thing. And Mrs. Radical is joined. Welcome. Thank you.
Hi, what a great live.
Oh, thank you. It's been very lively conversation, I must say.
Really, really good. Tonight we have Truth Through Discourse, so I'm super excited. Frontline's going to be joining me. We had an amazing conversation this afternoon, so I'm sure everybody's going to be as excited as we are.
Yes.
Lots to talk about in the world.
like Beaver Politics, I have the navigation station every Thursday. Every Thursday night is Mrs. Radical and Frontline Feminists, the Truth Through Discourse. And then tomorrow's show is going to be Pixie Lee, and she takes conversation from a more historical perspective. And, so it's about what's happening today, but it's about how the past is kind of repeating itself in many ways as well.
Yeah, and then in the evening we have Poly Talk with Nerdy, and that's a political debate that can go on for hours. So bring a drink, make a sandwich, prepare yourself.
Oh yes, bring a drink, bring a sandwich. Yeah, it's
and then what is it on Saturday afternoon? We have Jenna breaking the dam. Right, and Jenna's talking about mental health and wellness.
And then Mr. Radical on Saturday night.
Radicalize. Oh, I just can't. I'm just so excited. Like, we are filling in the slots. And I wake up in the morning and I'm thinking, I'm going to Beaver Politics a lot to find out what's going on. To tell you the truth. We got
on YouTube, Mrs. Radical. Because I'm an early morning, the night, there's things that are a struggle that way at night. But I go to YouTube and I get caught up on the shows on YouTube. So I encourage everybody to give us go and subscribe on YouTube, give our shows a like, and we're just starting, right? So
super exciting though. Happy joins us on Sunday evening.
Yeah, our
he is the new guy on the new Beaver on the block.
I want to just kind of get back to the conversation that we were talking about, the level of fear and the level of apathy that has resulted from that fear. And I think it's one thing to be able to sit from our privileged spaces and talk about fear and know that our fear is not as raw as the fear of someone like Frontline and her relatives back in Romania that could have to flee the country, right? And that Frontline, you said your parents immigrated here in response to a political takeover.
Well, communism and dictatorship ended in 1989 when Ceausescu was, can't really say the word on the live, but you guys know what happened. Taken out. And we've had a lot of history of Russian aggression and them, stealing riches from our country, and it's complicated. But when we saw Putin on the uprise to come into power in Russia, we were like, oh my gosh, we got to get out. And at that time, our country was still dealing with a lot of corruption. We were still, I think I was like 7 or 8 years old when we had our first McDonald's in Romania, because our borders were closed up until 1989. And so we were just starting to become more democratic and kind of join with Europe. But Europe never really liked us very much. We were always kind of the underdogs, the kind of the subhumans. I know that's a horrible thing to say, but we never really were liked. Even now, I think the Romanian money has some of the least value of most countries in Europe. So when we saw Putin on the uprise, we're like, oh my gosh, we're not part of NATO. NATO doesn't want us. Things were very unclear. And so there was a mass migration of people from my country to America, Canada, and Western Europe. And it was, I hope this doesn't sound bad, but it was all the people with university degrees that could get jobs in these other places, because that's the time where Canada and the United States were really looking especially for people in tech, computer programmers. My parents were computer programmers, right? They tried to get a job at Microsoft in the beginning, and they were actually turned down. So they came to Canada instead, which honestly, saving grace. Oh my God, I'm so happy they didn't get that job at Microsoft. Oh, thank God. But there was a mass migration of people for that reason, because it was unstable. We didn't know what was happening, and we were all scared when we saw him like, oh, he's going to take office in 2000. And then eventually after we left, like, you know, Romania got more friendly with the rest of Europe. We ended up becoming part of NATO in 2008. So we didn't necessarily feel too much, you know, Russian aggression outside of the political corruption that goes on. But there was no, you know, like, we didn't think that they were necessarily going to invade. We just thought, oh, they were going to place a Putin puppet in charge, because we knew that that was the plan, right? He was talking about it already. And so, yeah, we came here. So it was, it's complicated for people in Eastern Europe. It's very, very complicated.
Well, in our white supremacist colonial system that we have, welcomed probably people like you because of your skin color, more so than the migration that occurs around the world that creates refugees, let's say, for example. And, you know, when I look at what's happening at our border situation, I can't believe that we have a position called a border czar here in Canada to appease the Trumpity-dumpity crowd down there. But I'll tell you this, there's a migration that's going to go from the United States to Canada. And the border, strengthening that border, I think has more to do with controlling the amount of people that are going to try to leave.
I agree with that.
It's just a thought that there's more to it than fentanyl. There's more to it than fentanyl, right? And when the world powers shift like this, people migrate.
I mean, we're already seeing it happen. I mean, before he was inaugurated, there was thousands of Americans that moved up to Canada. People knew what was going to happen, and they're like, we're getting out now.
Yeah, get your paperwork in early. I see we have a new guest, Peace. Would you like to join the conversation and have, you know?
Yeah, thank you so much for holding this conversation and, you know, creating this space. So my name's Susan, and I'm in my 50s, and I live in Ontario. And, you know, watching what's going on with politics very closely. And, you know, I was in the car driving when you were talking about Doug Ford, and I just wanted to say, knowing the Fords growing up and watching them develop and seeing what's going on right now in Ontario, I wouldn't trust him very much at all, either through incompetence or ill intent. Right? Like if you were given a sticker company and then you created stickers to go on the gas machine to say, you know, this is the carbon tax amount, and then those stickers peeled off, that would kind of indicate some level of incompetence, right? It's just been one incompetence after another. But the scariest thing about this election is the fact that Elon Musk has a contract to put satellites above the Ring of Fire, right? Which is Ontario's mineral deposit on mainly Indigenous lands up north. And Doug Ford, the moment Doug Ford canceled that contract, the tariffs were put on hold and a snap election is called and the contract is back in the books. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that there's a lot of coincidence in that, or there's a lot of, what do you call it, like just happenstance. I think there is an intention to portray Doug as someone who's strong for Canada, but also plays right into the hands of turning Canada into the USA's Poland, because he makes threats that riles up certain populations in the US against Canada in a way that would never have happened. It also creates a sympathy and a sense of strength, right? Because we have that patriarchal belief that a strong man will be our best defense. And so I think it's very, very dangerous. And the fact that he's still polling ahead of the Liberals and looks to win another majority is inconceivable to me. But I guess it's entirely possible, and people don't realize that Elon Musk contract is back in the books, and the significance of that to our mineral control and our fresh water, and what that move by Elon Musk into that area of Ontario signifies. So I hope that people will raise that issue when you're speaking in your circles, to be on guard against Doug Ford. And I also wanted to comment on the federal level. I wish that the federal politicians were talking more about offensive moves against these tech bros to protect our election integrity and our internet and AI integrity. For my, I would prefer if they were now planning to, collect up all Teslas and, use them as some kind of electric fence against the US, because that's all it's good for. Like, get rid of Elon Musk, seize his assets, shut down the lies on Facebook and Twitter like they do in Europe, where they find them really hard for misrepresentation on political stuff. Like, they have all these fake CBC stories floating around on Twitter that should be easily fined, right? Yeah. Like, I want to hear the parties talk about some kind of cooperation to that end, but I don't even hear that coming out of the Liberals very much, to be honest, or the NDP. So,
can I ask you to? I couldn't agree more with everything you're saying. You started the conversation by saying that you've been watching Doug Ford and his family come to power basically for a long time, and we know that their family was vetted with drug dealing, and they kind of are corrupt. There's a lot of corruption involved with the family in general. But you said that Doug Ford took Starlink off of the table, and then your conversation said something about the tariffs. So my question is, okay, but the tariffs are back on.
So the timing, let's talk through the timing of it all, right? Mm-hmm. So the tariffs were going to be put on, February 1st? Is that right? Yeah. And so I think just shortly before the tariffs were put on, right, two things happened almost simultaneous. And I guess we could look up the dates, but it's almost simultaneous that the election is called. Doug Ford threatens to take the Starlink off the table, or rips it up, whatever figurative thing happens. They call the tariffs off till the day, the election is on the 27th of February. So it's the shortest, fastest called, most confused election in the middle of 10 years of snow in 2 weeks. And then March 1st is the tariffs are back on the table, right? So that's, and then as soon as the tariffs are off the table, the contract is back in the books.
Okay. All right.
Is that making sense now?
Yeah, it does, in a hurtful way.
I'm sorry.
No. There are truths, right? These are the truths we live in. And something as benign as your 2 weeks of snow, that's what keeps people away from the voting station. The
ballots are late coming in. People can't figure out how to, it's not been an easy election to participate in. Like, the thought of this election being called was in the cards before, about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks before the election was actually called. I started hearing that it was going to happen, but it is very timely and almost plot-like, right? That, I'm calling an election, I'm ripping up this contract. What? No tariffs, right? Oh, the contract's back on the table. We're going to have an election. And then the next day, the tariffs can be back on the table. Does that seem like Doug Ford is on Canada's side, really?
Proof's in the pudding on this one.
And he's not for the people, right? Like the other undercurrent, I think, that is happening in Ontario healthcare, and people can go to the Ontario Health Coalition and look up what's really happening in healthcare. And this has been happening since Mike Harris, where they privatize, they sell healthcare to private companies, but they pay it still out of the public pocket. So we just get less service and somebody gets more profit, right? And in 2003, they sold off long-term care in Ontario. And, the number one investor in Ontario's long-term care is Vanguard, right? Running Chartwell. And then the second biggest beneficiary is a corporation that's owned by Mike Harris's ex-wife, who also owns these placement agencies for nurses. And that's come about under Doug Ford. Instead of hiring nurses directly, they pay a corporation double the rate and then place the nurses as temps without benefits, but they get higher wages, so they feel better about their work, but they're getting less in the end. And I know this to be the case because in my job, I help people with their finances through divorce, and people are getting done. And there are many, I see everybody. I see everybody from low income to very high income. And the people who are doing, like the CEOs in Chartwell and the CEOs in the 407, and their hearts would break.
I was, in my social work career, I was working long-term care during COVID, and mortified, horrified at what was coming out of Ontario in the long-term care system. And of course, in BC, we've taken some protective action to try and stop that.
Never.
But what bothers me is that at least we forget. It seems like everybody has forgotten about the horrors that took place there, and that system has not been fixed, has not been addressed. And
the fix that Doug Ford gave us was to ban those of us whose parents, my father passed in COVID in a long-term care facility due to bed wounds, and the coroner actually investigated, and I never received a copy of that report. And that story is so horrible I can't even speak about it anymore. But yeah, the care, the pain Doug Ford has inflicted on the people of Ontario is unreal, but people can't connect the dots, right? They cannot connect the dots. And because they can't see where our government money is going, like it looks like we got all this money from the federal government, and yet we have 125% increase in hallway medicine. Why? And the answer is somebody's making $4.2 million running a long-term care home network.
yeah, that's the answer. That's the answer. Doug Ford and his, ability to distract people away from these kinds of horrors. I think, some of the proof of that is the marketing that he just did on the Hannity show on Fox News.
Why is he wasting our money?
Pay your dollars to be on Fox News and toting a message that's totally opposite of what Fox would tote. And people not being able to connect the dots, see the manipulation in that.
It's atrocious that people think that there's anything to be gained by kowtowing to a bully. There just isn't, right? And so the fact that Danielle and Doug, who are, in their own ways kind of bullies, right? And fraudulent people who don't mind bending the rules when it is to their advantage, right? they are the ones that can't see how necessary it is to stand up and not bend and give, like, be wishy-washy about the whole thing, right? And it tells you what their true intent is. It's to be part of the bully game, right?
Can I ask you, because on the debate, the show about the progressive moves has the side here on Beaver Politics was talking about the real possibility of Doug Ford going in with a minority government, and that there are polls showing there's 10 seats, really 10 seats that he's not going to win, that he had before, and that, 2 more seats would provide that minority status. Do you have any feedback as to, because you said he's going to go in with majority, so that conflicts with the information that I took in the other night.
Good.
So I just wanted to a little bit.
Thank you for giving me more hope. I need more hope. Let's never give up hope. I think I wish that the parties they had a good debate. We did have a really good debate. Like, I think Doug could not answer a question properly, so that was great. And the 3 opposition parties seemed to cooperate a little more than usual and were congenial to each other, which I think is actually helpful to their cause, as opposed to, being super partisan, although they were partisan. So I think that helped quite a bit. If Doug Ford gets a minority, because he's fundamentally a populist and a glad-hander, that's good for us, right? So Doug on a short leash is we can breathe. Doug with another majority, Toronto will be done. Like, Toronto can't stand another. What's happened with Doug, the developer's best friend, right? Around Toronto, if you sort of saw Lake Ontario and then you did a hands above it, there's a ring of development. And then above that is the green belt, which is the largest intact stripe of protected green space in the world, actually, right? And it protects what's called the moraine. I forget, the Oak Ridges moraine. And it's the filter for all the clean water that comes down into the lakes, right? And it was protected, ironically, by conservatives, right? And expanded and expanded. And then Doug and his 13 friends made these secret deals, which are currently under investigation by the RCMP. But of course, they can't, give us the goods before the 27th. Har, har, har. In any event. Yeah, my friends and we worked very, very hard to block that. As Ontario, Ontarians don't want the green belt cut up. We know it's important, and it's important to our food security, our water security. It's just not necessary to develop, right? We have lots of in space to develop, but they have ministerial zoning orders, MZOs. And so whenever the community makes a plan to say not develop on farmland or save the Oak Ridges moraine or blah, 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 they just, or, I don't know, whatever it is that they don't want us to do, they just come in with an MZO now, override what the community says and put the farmland back into their developer buddies' pockets. And it's so much provincial overstep or disrespect for the democratic process, and we had our local guy in Mississauga come and talk to me, unfortunately for both of us, at an event. And I was saying to him, we have no food security plan. And he's like, yeah, I know, because we need housing. And it's like, but not these $1 million single family homes in the middle of a farm field with no schools around. That's not what we need, right? We need housing for seniors who are stuck living in 5-bedroom homes in the city so that people can move into those houses. And he says, well, you should come to the city council and help us to deal with that. And I'm like, I did. And then you overrode it with an MZO. So please, don't vote Conservative, Ontario. Do not do it. It's not good for our health and our sanity.
That's an interesting get out of jail free card there, this ministerial override privilege that can be enacted. It reminds me of the term's leaving my mind. Tiny Trump threatens to use it. He's going to be the first.
It's an executive order thing.
Executive order. It's where is just in time? You would know the answer to this. It's how they override our Charter of Rights and
notwithstanding the notwithstanding clause.
That's just to get out of jail free card to do whatever you want to do, as long as you can rightfully justify it in a certain way. It's not hard to put it on paper to get that justification, apparently, because we've seen it used in really ridiculous ways, like the culture war stuff. Scott Moe in Saskatchewan used the notwithstanding clause to put in something about, I don't know if it was like the gendered bathroom conversation, but something really ridiculous on the culture war level. And using our political norms, using and abusing them in a way that ends up sowing seeds of mistrust in our political system. And our systems need to be holding strong, I will say. Canada is not crumbling the same way that we're witnessing down south, but we must take a grain of hope. Is that we have layers and layers to our parliamentary system. We don't vote for the prime minister, and I'm, for the first time in my entire life, happy about that, because I'm realizing that you corrupt one person who has a lot of power, you end up with a situation like we're dealing with in the United States. So, Trudeau in this case, or whoever the prime minister is just the leader of their party. That's all. They're the leader of the party, and it is still the party and the entire party that you would have to make corrupt. So there's a level of systems built in there. There are parliamentary normal systems that are designed so that it's harder for a tyrant to take over.
It's very interesting that you bring that up, because two things pop into my head about Doug Ford. Like, first, like Pierre, he, is in love with the vague threat of using the notwithstanding clause, right? He did threaten to use it twice, and once was against the teachers, EA, and janitorial staff in schools, right? That they went on strike and they wanted to declare them essential workers and use the notwithstanding clause to abrogate their right to strike. And then people were bloody outraged. My kids were like outraged because they were hiring scabs in their school to come in and clean. It was not like, the students walked out and he backed off from that. Right. But another thing is that I think is a strength in the Canadian system is actually our independent appointment of judges. Right. It's done in a very neutral, it's not voting. Right. The Americans vote in all of their judges and we have them appointed, and it's done in a very neutral manner, in that the bench of, like, it has its flaws, right? Let's say it has its flaws as I see here, but it's not that the prime minister or the premier makes a list of their people and then that sends them off to be vetted, right? It's that a group of, lawyers come up with a list and send that, their top picks to the whoever's appointing, and ultimately will approve, right?
I want to just add a caveat to that thought. Great thoughts. Thank you. Ever since the gift. Great thoughts about that. When Stephen Harper was in power, he successfully shifted how that appointee committee for the federal judges takes place. And he, it is a balance of on the committee that, like, the appointee have to be vetted, and the committee that vets them have to be appointed as well. But that committee had a breadth of professionals sitting on there. And when Stephen Harper was in power, he used somehow to change the laws on who gets to sit on that committee. And he put in that committee somebody from, I believe, RCMP was the background, and they did not want that RCMP voice at that table. And he manipulated that system. You know what? I'm gonna.
I think and you know what, Doug Ford did a very similar thing. He changed it so that, you know, they now make a list of selections, so the Attorney General has a hand in picking who's on the list, right? So it's interference with that, more neutral. But it's interesting that we're talking about it, because it all comes back to following these important norms that secure the neutrality, right? And most of our Westminster politics that really incorporates like the Haudenosaunee democracies, like concept, right, of cooperation, it relies on people to do their best and have integrity in ways that have been eroded, right? And that erosion, because you can't write down everything everybody has to do and in order to be moral and good, right? You just can't. You have to rely on people to do things and people to know the protocols to keep neutrality and cooperation at the high point order, like that. The ethical high point of our system are those beliefs, right? Those civil procedures. As boring as they sound, it's fundamental, right? It's fundamental.
I appreciate our system in new way. I'm 61 years old. I never thought that I would have a shift in my value system around our politics, and yet this whole, really the last 8 years, I know that's still a long time, isn't it? But you know, just in the last couple of years, since the rise of Tiny Trump here in Canada, we're paying attention more, and I can't be the only one.
No.
Oh, because so many people are interested in this. Is it because is it because there's an awakening, right? That we're having so many conversations like this now? I'm going to take that as the positive. That is going to be what shifts apathy, so that we don't get devastated and lose the neutrality of our parliamentary system. I love what you just had to say there.
Yeah. And the civility of it, the cooperation. My little moniker there, peace, is people everywhere are cooperating every day, right? Like, and that really is what makes us wonderful, right? Like, one of the things I think about a lot, because I read a lot of Darwin. People say like Darwin, like the survival of the fittest, right? Everything's a competition. But what Darwin is actually saying is the animals that survive the best are those that are best suited to nurture their young, right? Whether it's in community or by being the strongest, but whatever their environment is, if they are suited to nurture their young, then they will survive, right? That's the fittest. And it comes for humans, that is in our ability to cooperate.
I think that's, I'm noticing it's 3:00, so the show time's over. It's important for us in terms of our YouTube stuff and our tech person to sort of stay on time with the show. So I want to end it on that really positive message that you're sending out here, because it is positivity, I think, that'll help us to turn around. Can we do it quick enough for influencing something like Doug Ford? And that perhaps not, but we're going to influence it when it comes to our federal election. And like Justin Time said earlier, focusing on our federal system that protects us from so many other evils of the world, I think is some good positive messaging to leave with today. So I'm going to wrap up the conversation. And thank you so much. I'm not sure if I follow you or not, But
Well, thank you for holding this space, and you know what? I look forward to more conversation, and I think this is just the way, right? This is the way. So,
thank
yeah.
you so much. And Rad Mike, would you like to have any last thoughts before we wrap up the show?
I just wanted to reiterate my point of that we're in an election cycle right now. It's time to message our candidates that we want to see in power and tell them what we want, because we're gonna have the most influence at this point in time.
That's great, because sometimes if there isn't an urgency in the situation, maybe the politician doesn't pay as much attention to the message, but they're going to be paying attention at this point. They're going to want to know what their constituents are thinking, right? You make a good point. That is another really good point, is that people are paying attention. Our politicians will be listening more intently at this point. So everybody reach out, get in touch with your MLA, get in touch with your MP, your MLA if you're in like Ontario, because there is an election going on, or your MPs for the federal election. And Frontline, you're still up in the box, and I appreciate that you joined the show and gave your support for this long, especially when you've got your own show, and I'm going to plug the shows as my last piece. But if you got anything else you'd like to say or end the show with?
Sure. Make sure you join us in 2 hours. We're going to be doing Truth Through Discourse tonight. Big open panel chatting about all the different things that are going on and, what we think is really important to talk about right now. Tensions in Europe, what's going on in Canada, Ontario election. We're going to be covering all of that stuff tonight. So hopefully we'll see you guys there.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. So that's it for the navigation station this week. Wanted to really highlight some of our political systems that we can still have trust in and that we can engage in so that we can take control. And even if it is just, because we all live in a great deal of fear right now, and sometimes we're really good at putting it in check and not having it rule our emotive state in the moment it is. But that fear is real, and how we can kind of help to let go of some of that fear is by joining in these kind of conversations, for one thing, because it has a therapeutic value, but also taking some trust in the systems that still exist. Understand how our systems get abused. And maybe that's the introduction to the system that you may want to shift, like our non-confidence motion system. Anyways, I just want to end with a big thank you to everybody who's joined in on the conversation. This has been the Navigation Station on behalf of the Beaver Politics movement here on TikTok. We'll welcome you all into conversation next week. Tonight's show is going to be Truth Through Discord. Tomorrow's show is going to be Pixie Lee, and she has an historical conversation that is being added. And then on Saturday, we have Jana, who is focused on mental health, and then and talk about responding to fear. That's a mental health issue. And then Saturday, we have Radicalized Saturday night. Anyway, enough of the shameless promotion going on here. Thank you so much for joining the show. Absorbed One, thank you for moderating, and really gave me a lot of freedom to be able to engage in these conversations. So thank you for your time today as well. And we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.